All right, everybody, we're back with FTF Canada's Inside Look. Today, we're talking with Carlo Acquista from Fordham University Men's Soccer. Carlo, how are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. Come on.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So the first things first, can you tell us a little bit of history about your program? How long you've been there, and kind of the history of Fordham University.
Yeah, the history goes back quite a bit. I'll talk about how long I've been here and then a little bit about the history. So I've been here no more than 20 months. I would say 21 months. February would be 2 years that I was hired, 2019. The history goes a long ways because I mean, as a kid, I used to come to soccer camp here, so I knew the players and the coaches from being a young teenager coming down here, coming to Fordham for camp. And then Frank Schnurr, the former coach who's had some success, and then Jimmy McKeldry, who's now moved on, who has a lot more success. They really put a foothold into recruiting here and a destination for players. And we've seen some players now progress into the pros. So we want to be a great academic institution for a young man, and as well as a launching pad if they have pro aspirations. So that's a little bit about us. We're located in the Bronx, New York, literally just a few miles outside of Manhattan. So you kind of get the best of both worlds in and out of the city. Our campus is quite large. It's walking distance, but you wouldn't believe there's a university in the Bronx. How beautiful it is, and how historic it is, and many landmark buildings inside of it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an incredible part of New York, and it would be a pretty wicked destination for any player to end up in. So are there any footballing qualities that you're looking for at players kind of at every single position? Like what are the main characteristics that across the board
So
mandatory?
a lot of people can give you very similar answers right on that. And how I like to separate myself is a little bit through, um, if your defenders defend, that means they can defend, right? Like I'm not really worried about looking for the perfect player because that doesn't exist. The 1%ers already professionals, right? With the opportunities that everyone has now, that 1%ers go pro, and then the rest obviously are looking to a different avenue. For me, if you can put out fires as defenders, you make my list. In midfield, if you can be a two-way player and control the tempo, then you make my list. And obviously up front, I need to see some creativity, some speed, and some type of soccer IQ. But overall, the one thing I look at is mentality. The one area where I learned very quickly that separates players from Delphi to working with the New York Red Bulls professional organization to back to college is mentality. If you don't have a good mentality, you're not going to progress, and you're not going to be able to sustain all the information and all the back-to-back games and training. So for me, mentality is the one word that separates everything.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, at that level, you're going to be thrown into so many different variables and so many different situations where your decision making under pressure is going to come into the full big time, because you can put out the system that you want, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to put out that fire as a defender in that situation and make the right decision. Same thing as midfielder and right up front. So
I want to keep it simple for the players. How I recruit and how I look at things. I don't really look at I don't want to check off 10 boxes. It's just a couple for me.
No, yeah, for sure. And you spoke about mentality and you spoke about the off the pitch side of it. Like outside of football, what kind of individual characteristics are you looking for in recruits?
One of the things we said, well, one most important area is, do they have any character? Do they have personality? Yeah, I think that's very important. As a coach, you also want to be challenged, the right way from your players. So we're always looking for some different types of personality. It doesn't have to be very vocal personality, but kids that have personality and high character make a big difference for me.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really synonymous answer with most institutions. And again, that's progressing in the game. So if you're not going to have that character, if you're not going to be able to have those types of characteristics, you won't be able to
Well,
rise
that's
very
why
high.
that's why there's different levels for each player, right? There's Division One, Division Two, Division Three, and we'll talk about JUCO possibly, NAIA. There's different areas for every. There's a place for everybody. Just because Carlo might not like Adam as a player doesn't mean Joe does not like Adam. So there's a place for everybody.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, before a player, seriously thinks about Fordham and, they're looking at the institution, what are kind of the financial, or not financial, the academic standards that the school requires of new entrants, and then also potentially for receiving any financial aid?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very important question. As you know, and many people know, if you look up Fordham, Fordham's a top 50, 60 school in the country, academically. Um, we're fortunate enough that we're able to support a couple kids per year with admissions. But overall, SATs would have to be over 1100s and a 3.0 for athletics to support. Financial aid wise, to get a very good academic scholarship, or we say merit aid, you're looking at the 1300s and a high, 3.6, 3.7 GPA. So there's different areas of it, and it's also case by case. But now also financial aid. Financial aid, if it's outside of, say, an international player, there's plenty of financial aid that, with grants and Pell and TAP through New York. But for a young man coming out of Canada or internationally, if they get high grades, they're able to ask for money, and I think some of them get it.
Okay, that's really good to know. Now, you sign a new recruit. Now, what are the GPA requirements that they need to maintain every single semester?
Very fortunate. Here at Fordham, we have 4 full-time people working academic advising for athletics alone. So they really, really support the student athletes, and they also guide them into through each class and through the semester. So for us, we challenge them to keep a 3.0. If they get on the 3.0, they're going to be, they're going to need help, get some tutoring, which we have fantastic tutors here on campus as well. But it's interesting. So far, we've been very fortunate. Almost 2 years. They know by coming to Fordham, they're student first, athlete second. So they understand the workload and time management. So far, we've been very, very fortunate. But if they fall a little bit underneath, there's a lot of support for them on campus.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you touched on a couple of things that we're going to get into a little bit later there. But, going back to the footballing side of things, how important is it for incoming freshmen to understand the established culture of the program?
That's hard, right? That's really hard because they think they know, but they have no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
The one part of COVID, we were able to have a series of Zoom calls weekly with outside influencers. What I mean by that, I was very fortunate to have a couple of MLS head coaches that I'm friendly with, a couple of executives that work in MLS or in Italy, in top Serie A clubs, and they spoke about culture. I asked them to speak about culture, right? Being a good teammate, how do you become a leader, and how do you build a culture within your organization? So we went through that. So a lot of the kids that came in, first year players for us, had a very quick learning curve understanding of it. But typically, COVID is not going to happen, right? Every year, we hope, right? So those few weeks in preseason means a lot. But leading into it, I think we're going to be a little bit more clever and have the players lead small group sessions with incoming players and keep talking about the culture, because that's it. Once we get our culture where we want it, we don't want to drop anymore. We just want to keep pushing forward. So that's one area that I think I want to be better at with incoming players, get on them a little earlier.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I think one of the hard parts as a coach, looking back on my experience in that environment, was a lot of the culture is driven from the senior players. And what makes that a little bit more difficult is that they are so close in age to the incoming recruits. So they're not that high up, but the amount of experience that they've really had during that time is night and day compared to an incoming recruit. And
Okay, you're
as a
100% right.
as
Yep.
a coach, it's so hard to not stick your nose in, because you don't want to be necessarily you want to be the facilitator of the environment, but you don't want to have your hand on the pulse and control every little bit.
That's why spring is so important, and patience a little bit too with players is so important. And some coaches don't have that patience, but I think spring's important. I think spring's important for players to learn what they did wrong maybe in the fall. We can try some different things in the spring. The fitness part, the culture part, the time management part, all that comes into play. Because as a freshman, they're just excited to be here.
Yeah, they're excited and they're ready to get going, and it might take that little bit of time because they might
And
not hit the ground running.
but we have a lot of distractions here in New York,
Yeah, I've been in New York. That would be a tough one.
Yes.
So looking at, okay, so let's look at a normal year. Obviously, this year is
Yep.
somewhat of a wash, but looking at a normal year, look at the student athlete schedule. Does it vary too much between in season and spring, or is it pretty similar the whole way through?
No, it varies quite a bit. In the fall, there's a lot of games back to back, right? Training,
Mhm.
recovery. If you're lifting, if your schedule is strength conditioning as well. So it's really nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. In the spring, it's kind of just blocks, right? Less meetings, just blocks of 2-3 hours a day that you're working with them. They have a lot more time on their own to develop in the classroom or as their own person on campus. So it's definitely very different. I believe in the fall. It's very, you're lasered in, you're locked in, and in the spring, you can have an off day if that makes sense. It's okay to have an off day.
Yeah,
It's
no, for
it's
sure.
more development.
Yeah, it's more development, and there's not as much at stake,
Correct.
if that makes sense. And I mean,
Right.
that kind of leads right into the next question. And obviously, most incoming recruits, they're walking in right in the fall, and now all of a sudden they've got a student athlete lifestyle. So what do you think, and what have you found is the most important aspect of student athlete life that they need to learn almost immediately?
You know, just understand that maybe it's not okay to go out that night. That part of like the social life is very important because everybody wants to meet new people, and that's kind of why one of the reasons why you go to college, right? And you pick the school that you want to go to. And sometimes a lot of people it's location, part of it's soccer, part of it is social, things like that. Part of it is academics. So the social life for me is you have to be very, very careful with that in the fall so they get used to a certain way. One thing is for sure is we ask that each player lives with another player. Okay, so they get the same time we're getting up, pretty much same time you're going to sleep, same meetings, things like that. If you start living with other people off the team, that changes your lifestyle a little bit. So for me, the social part is very, very big on how they manage themselves.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like if you're living with someone with a completely different schedule than you, then there's just different triggers. There's different things going on in your house that they're just distractions at the end of the day.
Yeah, leave that for the spring. That's how I always say. Get some just kind of blossom more in the spring. The fall, we don't have much time, and we have to be laser focused.
Yeah, the balance is kind of, what that was something that I did struggle with when I first went, was trying to manage that social life balance, the playing balance, school balance.
Yep.
And then for me, I had a part-time job as well. So it was like trying to manage all these different things that it's just,
It's a bit unfair right now in the climate of the world that we live in. With you're just always on the go, and you just can't settle down. And settling down is important, and kind of breathing a little bit and understanding for your own mental health.
no, yeah, for sure. Now switching gears a little bit to more of the recruiting side of it. When you look at, looking at players from, a JUCO level or, a college level, what are the advantages of recruiting players like that?
Last year, my first season recruiting, we came in pretty late. We had very, very little time to build our team. We were fortunate enough that we knew some players that would be fifth year guys. So we looked at just 1 year players instead of bringing in somebody for 4 years in that short term. We also brought in a young man from a JUCO, and we thought it was helpful for us. It's not going with just young freshmen. These young men, they're really young men. They know how to train. They know how to compete. They understand when the coach gets on them, right? They understand time management better. So we do look at we look at a lot of the JUCO kids and international older kids as well to balance out our incoming class because of experience.
Yeah, I mean that kind of is what you'd expect from a kid who's already been at school, is that, you're expecting them to come in and understand that little bit more clearly than an incoming recruit.
Correct. 100%.
Now, when you look at, the recruiting side of it, do you notice a big difference between, American recruits and Canadian players?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One area I always believe in, like in Canada, right? You're all very well, I think a lot of clubs are very well connected to professional clubs in Europe, and all over the world. It's just a little bit different from, the United States, some clubs. We really hammer home from the beginning, college is very important on a soccer side I'm talking about, right? Not on an education side. A lot of Canadian kids that I know have all had the experience of going to Europe for a year or 6 months. It's pretty interesting at 15, 16, 17 years old before they come to college, We've got a player, Samir, who was in Germany for 6 months, when he was 16 years old. So a lot of the Canadian kids do try to go while they're younger and try to make it in Europe because they have the dual passport. So I think
I was one of them.
Yeah, so there you go. And then the American, you said you want to make call out the difference a little bit. The American have aspirations to go pro, but I think they also understand how important Division I scholarship might be, or a college scholarship might be as well, because they live in the States.
Yeah, no, most definitely.
I mean, that goes back to you guys. What you guys are doing as a company is great, because you're now trying to educate everybody step by step in Canada why getting a scholarship and going to the States might be better than going to Europe and trying out, for a couple teams.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's providing that additional, kind of stream to go and get to where you want to get to, because at the end of the day, if all you have is to travel overseas, I mean, that's a really difficult thing that everyone wants to do.
You got to knock on a lot of doors.
Yeah, and we have this really good system in North America where whether you're playing in U Sports in Canada or you're going down and playing the NCAA, there's so many opportunities to be seen. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to provide them with as many opportunities and many avenues as possible to get there.
Agreed.
Now, looking at, especially right now with COVID, highlight videos are probably pretty high on the important list for coaches, just to be able to, see something and to pique your interest. What are things that you would definitely recommend players include and not include? What is something that you're looking at?
So one of the things that I'm not a big fan of is just playing soccer. Like what I mean by, they get the ball and they just want to pass. That's great. What do you do off the ball, right? What are you doing when the game, you're losing the game, I want to see different moments when it comes to that. I want to see more situational moments. Recovery balls is very important. The physical stature of someone, it's also, you check off a box, the speed, the opponent that they're playing against. Put some thought into the videos, not just say, oh, that was a good pass, but we beat them to nothing. The coach won't know. But guess what? We are intelligent enough to understand who's who. We do our research. You know, we ask questions. We make phone calls. You know, a guy like you who has many contacts, you might get some phone calls about players. You know, hey Adam, do you know this kid? You know, things like that. So high level videos, high level games, more competitive games. What are you doing off the ball is very important to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on something that's really important there is that there's a variety of different aspects of your game that need to go in. It can't, if you're a center midfielder, you can't just put 5 minutes of square passes in there.
Correct.
Like you need
And then,
to show that you can break a line. You need to show, oh, this is, you know, this is technical my technical ability over distance. This is how I can break lines, you know, by dribbling. There's all these different variables that you need to put in. What do you do defensively? What's your positioning like?
because you can't really trick us, right? You know, if you play 10 passes in a row and it's between 5 and 15 yards on the ground, that's great. You know, but can you play a longer ball? Can you play out of pressure? You know, can you build the attack? Can you end the attack by scoring a goal? Can you get in the box? There's so many variables that we look at situations. Like if you're going to be a passer, come play with me on my over 40 team 7v7. You'll be fantastic, you know?
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's like, okay, we got the highlight tape. You know, the next step is then to get the full game tape, and then you're going to see them play in a full game anyway. So
That was my next thing. Even a mini game, even if a 20-minute mini game of each half, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Just watching a full game is a bit, boring at times.
Yeah.
And great music.
You need great music.
Music is important.
All right, is there any genre of music that you're like, I can't
I'm
listen
a big fan of Coldplay and Adam Levine. So
Okay. Okay. Noted.
The next video I get, make sure it's on there. All right.
Yeah. I'll edit it myself if I have to.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Now kind of in a normal year, and maybe even looking at, the new reality of what we're in, what are kind of the showcase events that you try and get to in a normal year? And then given the fact that, what COVID's probably done to the recruiting environment, what showcases would you be interested in watching online?
Well, the showcases where, or we'll say events that we've had success so far is in Canada per se. We'll say Canada first would be in Toronto, right? It's such a high percentage of population, different backgrounds and ethnicities, very good contacts there alone with a couple of clubs. So I haven't branched out of Toronto kind of area, but I think for me, what's important is to try to branch out into Montreal and to Vancouver. We haven't hit the West Coast. Fordham itself in the States, California is big. We'd like to get to California more. We have some players from California that would like to come here. We've been out there a couple times before. Local, because Fordham's such a popular school locally, and New York has got a nice, talented crop of players with the academy, with New York Red Bulls and New York City FC. We just signed a young man, starting center midfielder from the New York Red Bulls, coming in for 2021. And then obviously our showcases most likely are in Florida or in kind of Texas where it's warmer.
Yeah, for sure. So you're kind of looking at like Disney Cup, Dallas Cup.
So like I was gonna say the Disney Cup would be one, the Dallas Cup, the MLS, the Next Generation Cup that they have.
Yeah.
In conjunction with the Dallas Cups, that's when we're in Texas probably for 10 days scouting. So those major events are good because it's just one location,
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, most definitely. Now, when you look at, the recruiting cycle, obviously it needs to start somewhere. So when do you start recruiting like the next class?
Yeah, well, typically without COVID, we were already on to our 2022, like right about now. But since COVID has kind of stopped that a bit because we can't really do much recruiting, obviously, besides video. I think in the new year we're gonna get going on 2022. 2021 was an interesting one for us because we stopped recruiting because of COVID, and because the seniors will get another year back, we're bringing back all of our players. So we really only have room for 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. And then at the same time, you're kind of you could be left in limbo where if at the end of the day, a senior goes, I'm graduating.
Correct.
It's one of those things that it's one of those weird years. But so, that's where you're at for your next class. But like, at what age do you start looking at a player and going, okay, especially locally, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because yeah, that's a little bit different than, watching someone internationally.
Sophomore year helps because they get on your radar, at least your eye, and then when you see them as juniors, it makes a big difference. We'll go either way. If we don't believe the crop of players that we want or can get as juniors, then we'll wait. We'll wait it out and kind of just wait until like they become second spring juniors and go into their senior year. Sometimes you have to wait it out. So it's just so many ways you can recruit and slice it up. So you might talk to say Wake Forest and they're done already for 2022, right? They might leave one player of it open because they're Wake Forest, but it's different for Fordham. Things take time. Who wants to transfer back home? Who's already away at another school for 2 years? Who's slightly less developed, but we can keep watching him for quite a long time, and then his senior year kind of blossoms. So it's a big difference on talent pool and how we recruit every year. We just try to find the best players at that moment for the university.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important there, is that players they develop at different rates. And so just because, you might develop late doesn't mean that the opportunity is not there for you. It might not be at Wake Forest, but, if you can get into a really good program and then play against Wake Forest, for me, that would be a huge drive for me to go, I'm going to go play against them. I'm going to prove them wrong.
Correct. And that's kind of, one of the areas where I learned a lot in Major League Soccer when I was working for the New York Red Bulls and even out of Delphi, you've got to find that talented, undervalued player. Okay? You don't have to always go watch one player everybody's looking at. I want to see who's playing next to him, I want to find that slightly undervalued player who's got high potential. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, I find that that's kind of like I think like that's the biggest difference for me between like talent identification and talent selection. Everyone can select the A1 recruit. That's the prototypical that every single school's after. Everyone can select that one, but it's that identifying that other one where you're like, that kid's he's gonna make a difference.
The kid next to the top player might have a better mentality than the person you're looking at with a little bit more talent. Well, guess what? I'm okay with the high talent, high mentality, a little bit less talented player. It goes a long way.
For sure. Now, looking at kind of the future and stuff, what are the benefits in recruiting that you found from events like ours that we stream where you've got a group of it's an 11v11 game with players who haven't played with each other necessarily?
I think it's fantastic. I'm okay with players not playing necessarily with each other, So what you guys are doing, streaming the games and getting it out to us is fantastic. I'm really looking at the individual first, okay, of what he does when he's on the ball, off the ball. And then the secondary part I'm looking at, how is he connecting? Because if I see him and he sparks my interest, then obviously there's more to it. You just got to get into it, the background of the player, right? You got to get more video, more matches with his own team, talk to the person, things like that. But those type of videos you guys are streaming 11v11, I like it because you're looking for an individual player, what they do, and then from there we can grow and look at his body of work.
Yeah, and one of the ideas that we had, and one of the things that we really thought would be applicable, especially at the university level, is that these incoming players are going to go into a group that they've never played with.
Correct.
So if you can all of a sudden make a difference in an 11v11 where you haven't played with anyone, that kind of translates to something where you're like, okay, that kid could really produce something there. Let's see what he can do when he's comfortable.
We go back to personality. That's the personality that we look for. Massively. You shine a little bit more. We always talk about it on the youth side with friends of mine, their daughters or sons are 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and they're decently talented. Hey, throw them into the mix with people they don't know. Let's see how they do with players that they don't know. Let them get uncomfortable a little bit. And if they're uncomfortable, that means they can do well. They can deal with certain situations.
Yeah, most definitely. And just to wrap up, do you have any other advice for any players that are, potentially interested in Fordham or looking to, continue their process of recruiting?
Yes, stay on top of us. Right now, it's a very difficult time through COVID, and we can't do anything. And we have a lockdown with recruiting as well. Stay on top of us. Send us stuff. We might not watch it right away, but believe me, we are organizing our recruiting lists and positions of need for the future. So just keep sending us stuff. At some point, if you spark our interest, we're going to get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Carlo, for sitting down and chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I appreciate it.
No problem.